Now, I want you to imagine a husband and wife. They're in a car, they're looking for an address, and they're lost. And the wife suggests that they ask someone for directions. She's thinking, why won't he ask? He's thinking, why can't she just let me find it? You see, since the man's emphasis is on respect, he's trying to avoid looking lost to a stranger. The act of asking someone else for directions may make him feel like he's in a lower position. Finding their way is a challenge to him, and he wants to show his wife that he can find it on his own. For the woman, such an idea may not come to mind. She may view it as a simple interchange between them and a stranger. They get help and directions, and they find out where they're going. At 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 33, Jehovah tells us, "But the married man is anxious how he may gain the approval of his wife." Wives, your husband is anxious to have your approval and respect. But on balance, husbands have to be careful that an emphasis on respect doesn't become unreasonable. It won't hurt us to ask for directions or help at times. On the other hand, a wife needs to be careful that she doesn't show impatience by her words or tone as her husband works his way through a problem. A wife who clearly understands her husband's desire to solve problems for the family will understand his actions and will do her part to support him, even in the little things around the home. Now, this support in the little areas of life builds his confidence in her support and can be a major factor in whether a husband takes the lead in larger matters.
Apparently, it's all on wives to support their husbands. It's a one-way thing. It's not a mutual thing. And frankly, viewers, so much of what John Ekrann is saying in this talk would make perfect sense if he wasn't singling out women or singling out men. Much of what he's saying is just basic common sense. But when you direct this common sense towards just one party, you immediately skew the whole thing and you frankly reveal your bias. John Ekrann is lecturing husbands and wives as a husband, as a man, and quite frankly, it's showing. He was talking just now about the way women or wives need to support their husbands, and he outright says that the level of support a wife gives her husband may dictate the extent to which the husband is able to take the lead or assume authority in larger matters. In other words, if your husband isn't doing well in the organization, isn't a ministerial servant, an elder, doesn't have some kind of super duper privilege on the circuit or even in Bethel, might it be that it's your fault, wives, for holding back your husbands, for not giving them the support you need? If your husband isn't making waves in the organization, could it be that you're to blame? That's what I took from that last little dig. But on the whole, wow, again, just so much misogyny. I was floored when he says,
"A wife needs to be careful that she doesn't show impatience by her words or tone as her husband works his way through a problem."
Quite an intimidating way of putting it, don't you think? You need to be careful, wives. You need to be very careful that you're not impatient by your tone or by your words. Your husband needs to work his way through problems without your impatient interference. This is supposed to be a governing body helper delivering spiritual food on behalf of the faithful slave. This is the attitude that this organization has towards women, towards wives in the organization. They are being singled out. This isn't advice that's being given to both parties in a marriage. Again, it would make sense because this is just common sense, isn't it? Not to be impatient towards someone. to let them figure things out for themselves. It would sort of make sense if this advice were being given to both sides equally. But when you single out one side, as a man, if you're singling out women and saying, don't be so impatient, women, be careful that your tone and your words aren't impatient. What you're essentially saying is women or wives have a problem. And that problem is that they don't support their husbands by being impatient through their tone or through their words.
Have you ever seen a couple where one of them is telling a story and the other is constantly correcting the details? Or the husband is trying to give some direction and the wife corrects or challenges the direction? Or the husband is telling others some unflattering story that hurts his wife's feelings? How can Ephesians 5:33 help a wife in these situations? Well, since a husband's emphasis is on respect, he'll be much more sensitive to comments his wife may make in front of others. It can hurt a husband deeply when his wife openly challenges him in front of others. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 12 has this advice for wives. She rewards him with good, not bad, all the days of her life. So when in public, or when others are around, even close family and children, try not to openly disagree with him, correct him, or attempt to take over what he's doing. How you speak to your husband in front of others is a great way to show your deep respect for him. It also builds respect for him and others, including any children in the family. Now, the best time to bring matters to each other's attention is when you're in private, or if needed, when you can talk in such a way that others cannot hear what's being said. In this way, a wife shows deep respect for her husband, and the husband shows his love for his wife.
Well, we're learning all about what a partnership is in the context of a Jehovah's Witness marriage, aren't we? Not really a partnership, is it? Again, if it's a partnership, both sides are equal and both sides have the right to give input, have the right to weigh in on a situation, irrespective of whether they're in public or in private. But because it's not really a partnership, because women are supposed to be in subjection to men in a Jehovah's Witness marriage, women need to watch what they say. They need to bite their tongue. They need to be mindful of their husband's feelings, of the husband's emphasis on respect. Again, all of this, all of what we're hearing right now is based on John Ekrann's reading of Ephesians 5, verse 33, which simply says, each one of you must love his wife as he does himself. On the other hand, the wife should have deep respect for her husband. It literally just says, husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. Again, kind of a skewed emphasis there on respect for the husband. But what this verse doesn't say, does not say, is that there is a greater emphasis on respect for men and a greater emphasis on love for women, and this dictates everything in a marriage. That's what John Ekrann is reading into this verse, to the point where he's now projecting this idea that women need to be careful what they say around their husband, and they're not allowed to openly challenge their husband, or in other words, contradict their husband if they're in the presence of other people. Just bizarre that he thinks that this sort of thing will wash. Again, in the 21st century, when, okay, we may not have full gender equality, but we're certainly further along in that respect than we were in, say, the 1950s, when what John Ekrann is saying would have sounded more normal. It's not normal, John Ekrann. what you're spouting is utter gibberish based purely on your own opinions and observations. And when he cites Proverbs 31, she rewards him with good, not bad, all the days of her life. He's referring, of course, to the passage in Proverbs about the capable wife. And I've already spoken about this in my rebuttal to the Always Rejoice convention, because they brought up the verses on the capable wife when they were giving advice or instruction to women during the convention. I pointed out that the sexism and misogyny is on open display in that verse in particular. What it says in Proverbs 31 regarding the capable wife is, her sons have risen up and pronounced her happy. In other words, if you want to be capable as a wife, you'd better bear children. That's your role as a woman or as a wife. You need to procreate. You need to produce offspring for your husband. That's the sort of thinking, that's the sort of backward ideology that John Ekrann is appealing to here.
A good marriage is hard work. How is your marriage? Would you say that you've developed good patterns or bad patterns in dealing with each other? When was the last time you talked as a couple about love and respect for each other? Jehovah's perfect advice at Ephesians 5:33 can help the marriage of two imperfect people. In just a few words in this verse, Jehovah's sharing with us a key principle of how he designed marriage. He's telling us what each needs and places emphasis on. Husbands put emphasis on being respected, and wives put emphasis on being loved. And this principle forms a key part of the divine pattern for marriage. If you want your marriage to operate as Jehovah designed, then work hard to apply his perfect principle of love and respect in your marriage.
You can wave wooden wheels at us all you want, John Ekrann. It doesn't make your points valid. It doesn't make your ridiculous monologue any more coherent. You keep talking about this divine principle of greater emphasis on respect for men and greater emphasis on love for women, again, based purely on a verse that says, husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husbands. It doesn't say anything at all about men in general placing a greater emphasis on respect and women in general placing a greater emphasis on love. Isn't it kind of convenient for you as a man, John Ekrann, if that's the case, if men get to have the respect and women just get to have the love? Doesn't that work out well for you? Wouldn't this be a little bit more compelling if it were a woman saying this, based on her observations? Oh yes, I prefer to be loved as a woman. I'm not so bothered about being respected. That's essentially what he's saying repeatedly, all based on his interpretation, his male-centric interpretation of Ephesians 5, verse 33. He also says,
when was the last time you talked as a couple about love and respect for each other?
That's the sort of guilt-tripping question that you could sneak into any talk, isn't it, to try and make your point towards the end. And the audience will be sitting there thinking, oh, he's got a point there. It's been a while since me and Deirdre sat down and had a conversation about the need for love and respect. If Deirdre does sit down with you, if your spouse, I don't know why I've picked the name Deirdre, if your spouse does sit down with you and says, Kevin, it's time we have a conversation about the need for love and respect in our marriage, you know you're in for a difficult conversation, don't you? Again, he's creating this unlikely scenario that's only really going to happen if things are really bad, let's face it. And he's putting this in there so that Jehovah's Witness husbands and wives who are watching this will be thinking, John Ekrann's got a point there. Damn it. We've not had a conversation about this for a while. Therefore, all of what he's saying must apply to us. We must be failing in some way. We need to be careful because we're letting things slide on this issue, even though they might have a perfectly fine marriage where they haven't had to discuss love and respect because the love and respect is there, irrespective of what it says in Ephesians 5 verse 33 or John Ekrann's interpretation of what it says in Ephesians 5 verse 33. Again, this is all just John Ekrann projecting his backward, misogynist, narrow-minded views on millions of Jehovah's Witness husbands and wives.